The city of McLendon-Chisholm likes PIDs so much, I believe that they're going to do another one. It's time for some straight talk, McLendon-Chisholm. I'm Bunker Bob Steinhagen, and this is the Bunker Bob Show. Yes, I received a very interesting email from a member of City Council, and I'm going to highlight that because it really does bring to bear what's really happening in the city of McLendon-Chisholm, and that is a development that was basically presented at the last City Council meeting by the Huffines Community Development Group. And that development group is basically wanting to put in a massive development inside the city of McLendon-Chisholm. And I had some questions about it. So I asked two members of City Council as I was asking questions about the budget. I asked two members of City Council also, I'd like to talk about this Huffines Development Group proposal. And only one of the council members would talk to me and about this and answered questions about it. And I'm not saying that the other one won't or wouldn't, but they were really, I guess, out of time to talk to me about it. But I did. What was interesting is I did receive an email from one of those members of City Council, and that email kind of brings to bear this issue. So they start out with, I watched your program with interest. And what they're talking about is the last show that I did about the budget and the tax hike, that it was an inflated budget, that the tax hike is completely unnecessary, that the whole purpose of the tax hike is basically to provide the city a surplus. So instead of having $100,000 and something of surplus at the end of the year, they want to have almost $500,000 of surplus. And so this is what they go on. They say, I'm always in support of constructive criticism of government. I would like to know how you define open space and how we as government officials can work to support maintaining open space in McLendon-Chisholm. Now, what's interesting about this email is I had just done a budget show. Didn't say anything about any of the points that I made. Never offered, hey, I think you were mistaken on this issue. You should reconsider this. Nothing. So instead, we're focusing completely on this other issue. And so this is where they want to talk. And so can you supply solutions, interestingly, can you supply solutions toward their preservation, and please be specific? Preservation of the open spaces is what they're talking about. I'm not convinced that mandating a 1.5 or even 1 acre home site for developers truly maintains the open space definition alone. Please help me to imagine the concept more clearly. It's an interesting question, but the PS is really where they show their hand, and I'll explain that as you read it. P.S. The one constant here is that landowners have rights like all of us to dispose of their properties as they see fit. Developers have the right to purchase. They too have the right to develop those properties based on a capitalistic model to which I subscribe. Maintaining open space will be a challenge to preserve based on these property tax rights that exist in law. Thanks for your assistance on this issue. The reason I say that they show their hand a little bit is because this is exactly what developers try to do when they are trying to come in and obliterate a city standard. And the fact of the matter is the city of McLendon-Chisholm is in the middle of a comprehensive plan, of redoing the comprehensive plan. That plan, I've seen early copies of it. That plan is going to make proposals that eliminate the 1.5 acre minimum per home site and lower that to 1 acre. But I'm just going to tell you right now that means nothing. It is meaningless. So anytime anyone says, "Well, we've got this standard," it doesn't matter. How do you get Sonoma Verde in a town that has a 1.5 acre minimum per home site standard? You have corrupt members of government, which is exactly what happened, which is how it happened, that Sonoma Verde came into being, and Triple Creek, more importantly. I think Triple Creek more than Sonoma Verde, actually. But the fact is, the question comes in, and don't developers have property rights? And the answer to that is yes, of course they have property rights. They have property rights just like you and me. But this is a fallacious question, and it is basically a red herring argument, because they really are not. They're trying to move away from the real issue at hand. And so, before I explain why a city council should hold developers to a standard and basically to tell them that is not denying their rights, and it has nothing to do with capitalism. I'm a free market conservative. I believe in the free market. I am also not an anarchist. And so, unfortunately, what's interesting about these conversations is people try to make it seem like you're not a free market conservative if you believe in the rule of law. And I believe in the rule of law. And that is a definition of a conservative. Where I get off is when new laws are enacted without the consent of the governed. When you have people in office who basically create new laws without thinking about the impact of what that's actually going to have on the larger community. I'm going to talk about more about that in a minute, but let me go to that development, because this is from, and I actually got through an open records request, I got a copy of the presentation from the Huffines Community Development Group, and what they're proposing is something called Trilogy. This is their new development. Now, earlier last year, members of City Council went on a little bus tour, and Huffines Development Group, the Community Development Group, took them on a little bus tour to see their other developments. So what I would encourage you to do is to watch the last City Council meeting. And there's two reasons for that. One, you can see just how much of a sales job this is. In fact, the gentleman, Mr. Huffines, who was doing the presentation, and then the person who followed him, they actually got up in front of the city council and turned their back to the city council and spoke to the audience. They weren't here to talk to the city council. No, the city council, I will argue, I will speculate, city council is already in their back pocket. Their job now is to convince the citizens to go along with this. And if you want to see a sales job, boy, that's it. The problem with it is, city just budgeted $41,000 to update its new AV equipment so that broadcasting can take place. And ask yourself this: is the city getting its money's worth from it? Remember, when I was mayor, I was the first mayor to actually broadcast our city council meetings. And you know how much it cost you? It cost you nothing. Why? Because I have the expertise to do these kinds of things, but you don't need $40,000 of equipment to do it. And by the way, go look at those old city council meetings and ask yourself, which one's better? Which one do you actually understand what's going on? In fact, right now, if someone is doing a presentation, you don't see the presentation being made. These slides that I'm showing you, you wouldn't have been able to see them. You won't be able to see them if you watch the presentation. But that's just another more of the big government mindset that is running the city of McLendon-Chisholm. So this is the property overview of Trilogy. And so exciting, isn't it, that they've got this great name, and the branding of this is just amazing. Well, I do want to make sure that people understand where this is located. And so I'm going to give you a bird's eye view so that you can get your bearings. I'm a visual person, a visual learner, and so it's typical. I spent an inordinate amount of time really trying to understand exactly where this development was going to be and what it was going to look like. So this is basically the overview. You can see I-30 up on to the top left corner. You see 205 FM 550 where it goes right next to this development, proposed development, FM 549. So you can see that. Now let me give you another perspective, and that's the perspective of Sonoma Verde. There's Sonoma Verde. And so as you can see, Sonoma Verde is 509 acres. It's got 1,100 homes. This development that is being proposed is 898 acres. And they're proposing 2,188 homes. And so to give you a sense of where that fits in with the cityscape, so the orange there is McLendon-Chisholm, the blue or purple is Heath, and Rockwall is up there in red. And so you can kind of see there is a blending of where this new development kind of takes place. And the majority of it is actually in the ETJ. But let's take a closer look. Let's zoom in a little bit. And so you can kind of see where everything is and give you some perspective. Right there is McLendon-Chisholm City Hall. Heath High School is off to the left. Kane Middle School and Pullen Elementary School are just above there. So you see where 549 is. And so that gives you a perspective of where this development is going to take place. And again, let me zoom in even more and give you a better perspective of exactly where this is. And so you can see Pullen Road, FM 550, right there. And this entire property that you're looking at is actually owned by the Hodges family. And if the Hodges name sounds familiar, well, it should. Hodges was an early mayor of McLendon-Chisholm, and his son, Nathan, became mayor. I helped get him, make him mayor. I was actually the person who asked him to run and tried to convince him to run, and it was the biggest mistake of my life, I will tell you that. We were in favor of a tax rollback. Of course, we had a lot of opposition from the Mark Kippets and Mike Donigans who tried to present false information, half-truths, and outright lies about what would happen if we approved the tax rollback. That was back in 2015. If you remember, I was the one who led that fight to put it on the ballot, and then campaigned to make that happen, and also campaigned for city council. That passed overwhelmingly, and I was elected by a landslide and the largest voter turnout in the history of our city by a factor of 3. And because of that, one of the reasons, and by the way, that tax rollback had absolutely no negative impact on our city. In fact, we actually ended the year with a significant surplus, just like is going to happen this year. And I will argue that if that tax rollback, the organizers of this year's effort to get a petition drive so that a rollback can be on the May ballot, if those organizers are successful, and I believe that they will be, there will be zero negative impact to the city of McLendon-Chisholm. And I will argue that they will have even more of a budget surplus than they are budgeting with the tax rate increase. Mark my words. And I think the last show proved why that is true, but just mark my words that's the case. But this property that we're talking about, so I talked about Nathan Hodges, I talked about his father, and the reason that's important is because the question was asked of me. If you're in the email from a member of council, doesn't a property owner have the right to dispose? They use the word dispose, or I'm going to say sell their property. And the answer is yes, however they wish. They want to sell it to a developer, fine. But the problem is with the idea that that developer shouldn't have to abide by the laws of the land. When my wife and I moved into Quail Creek in McLendon-Chisholm, neither one of us had ever lived in an HOA. And so one of the first things I did when we were looking at the home was get a copy of what's known as the CC&Rs, Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. It's basically what you can and can't do inside the community. And so I looked at it and came to the conclusion that, hey, I can live by this. This is something doable. I had a choice. If I couldn't live by the standards of the neighborhood, well, then I didn't have to buy a house in Quail Creek in McLendon-Chisholm. But I could. I read it. I knew what I was getting myself into, and so I did. And the same with the city. When a developer comes into a city, when a developer buys property, they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're getting themselves into. So for a developer to say, well, listen, this is property rights issue. The answer that the council member who sent me that email should give to that developer is, yeah, you have property rights. You knew what those rights were when you purchased the property. You knew what the laws were. You knew what the restrictions were. Now you want to come and say, we don't want to live by that? I had the opportunity to kind of show this Huffines Group proposal to a couple of very well-known developers. I'll put it that way. And they've done things called MUDs. They've done PIDs. And they basically kind of explained to me, this is very, very huge, normal. And what they said, and one of the things that they enlightened me on is the fact that, well, the city of McLendon-Chisholm has already violated the 1.5 acre minimum per home site standard with Sonoma Verde. So we've got a history of just saying to the homeowners, to the taxpayers in McLendon-Chisholm, hey, screw you. We're going to do whatever we want. So the history is already there. And so this developer is looking at this. And isn't it interesting that it happens to be owned by the Hodges? Now the Hodges, Nathan Hodges happens to be politically influential in McLendon-Chisholm. Remember, he was mayor. He resigned from office. Then he got back on council as a councilman and then resigned again. But he's still influential. And this group, this development group, is really hoping that Nathan's influence is going to make a difference. What's interesting about it is, though, remember when Nathan's dad was mayor, they created the standards. They created the limitations, the ordinances that are put to restrict this land. And so when they were living there, when they were living in McLendon-Chisholm, which, by the way, Nathan Hodges no longer lives in McLendon-Chisholm, but when they were living here, those laws were good enough for them. But now that they want to sell their land, now that's another story. Now they want to go, they want the city to basically bend over. And they want you, the citizens who live in McLendon-Chisholm, to do the same thing. And so going back to this property, you can see that this is 889 acres total. And there is, 640 acres of housing. That's 2,188 proposed. Now, compare that to Sonoma Verde. Remember, Sonoma Verde is 509 acres, 1,100 homes. There's 258 acres of open space. I'm putting that in quotes. And that includes 11 acres of neighborhood parks and 6.4 mile trail system. Now, this is indicative of the city administrator, the mayor, and a member or two of city council working with this developer to put this presentation together. The company that is putting together our comprehensive plan study, they're going to say people are clamoring for these trail system. They want somewhere to walk. And so this is, so they're basically hitting these high points. So what's going to happen at this next city council meeting is the comprehensive plan study is going to be released. And they're going to be talking about all the little buzzwords that this Huffines Development Group is adding into their their presentation. They're already here. How is that possible that they're already here? Do they always do this? No, they get to know the community very well. Before Huffines Group came and talked to City Council, they knew everything. They had already gotten all of the information in advance, so they knew what they needed to say, and that's why they turned their backs to the City Council. Please watch it, by the way. I think it's August 24th. Please watch it for yourself. See if what I'm saying is not true. Because the entire presentation, their backs were to City Council. They were not talking to City Council. They were talking to you and me. This was one big sales job. So I think the bigger question, and I'm sure that many are asking, is, well, if this is true, how do I know that it's a PID? And the answer is basically understanding history. How did Sonoma Verde come into being, and how that kind of works? And this kind of gives you a sense. So the darkened in area, that's outside of this little planned development. But if you look there, I've basically highlighted the areas of the city, of which city are inside this development. So you see McLendon-Chisholm has two big portions of it, and Heath has a portion of it as well. And so the rest of it is in an ETJ. Now, there are two options for this development group to move forward with their plan to put this development in place. The first is a MUD, a municipal utility district. The problem with a MUD, and let me, for those of you who live in Sonoma Verde and know what a PID is, a MUD is a PID on steroids, because a MUD is literally a city unto itself. A MUD has to, basically you pay a lot fee. I think it's, depending on how big your lot is, you're basically paying for that lot, and once you pay off that lot, well, then you don't have to pay anything else on it anymore. With a MUD, it's different. That lot fee is every month, every year that the homeowner has to pay. But MUDs are very problematic for so many reasons. And the biggest one for developers, now that the state of Texas has mandated that MUDs are required to provide water, they are also required to provide public safety, which means fire safety. And I'm not sure about if they have to have some kind of police force. I don't think that they do, but they are required to provide fire safety, and that is costly. If you live in McLendon-Chisholm, you already know what's happening in our little city, where half of all fire calls go outside of our city to those who contribute nothing to their fire safety. And yet we foot the bill for them, and we give them as the same level of service that we enjoy. That's called welfare in where I'm from, in a capitalistic society. So how do I know it's going to be a PID? Well, a MUD, the other problem with a MUD is you've got to have, according to the developers that I was speaking to, you really have to have at least 2,500 to 3,000 acres to make a MUD really work. And one of the developers I was talking to said, it is interesting in this economy, and with everybody moving from California and stuff, MUDs are easier to finance than they've ever been. However, it is still, there's just doesn't seem to be enough property here for a MUD to really make sense to any developer. So what's interesting is this developer is saying things that make it clear, that leave no doubt as to their intent and what exactly they are trying to do. And I want to show you, because this is directly from their presentation. This is the presentation. I've actually just changed the slide color because it's easier to read. That's all I've done. But this is their presentation, so you can see it for yourself. First of all, this is a sales presentation. They highlight this is a $1 billion value. A value to who should be your question. Well, the city, what do they say? City income is based on 2,188 new home sites at an average price of $400,000 each. And so what that will do for you is it will give you a revenue for the city. What it will do for the city it will give you a tax revenue of $1.6 million a year. Residential building inspection fee of $1,500 a lot. That's $3.2 million, folks. Then wastewater impact fees. That's $2.2 million roughly. What about the net sanitary sewer revenue? That's $144,000 a year. But here, folks, watch this. This is how I can say with absolute certainty that this development is in the works to be a PID because of what is, and a PID with McLendon-Chisholm, not Heath. I'm going to explain why. But this next bullet point. It says all cost paid by the city will be reimbursed by the developer. Folks, that does not happen with a MUD. A MUD does not pay a city back, but a PID does. There it is. Sorry about that. I guess I missed that cue on that. But there it is. All cost will be paid. How? How is it going to be reimbursed by the developer? But they go on. Total development fees paid by the city is going to be $5.7 million. Total annual revenue to the city, $1.8 million. And for a city whose entire budget is about $1.8 million, wow, that sounds really good. Total drain on our local community, well, that's priceless. That's what I think. And so that's, excuse me. So that's how I know that this is a PID. There is no other mechanism known to man that makes all of this possible, but it keeps going. Let me go to the next slide from this Huffines Community Development Group. Here's what they say. Here's what they write. That the Department of Public Safety funding assistance. So this is what they're going to do. They're going to dedicate a 2-acre site for a DPS building. Now, this is curious that they have this included into this presentation since, I don't know, the new DPS station that is being built under construction was literally outside of City Hall. And the presenter should have known that and should have seen it. But this is what they've got. This is what they're offering. You see, because if they did this through a MUD, they wouldn't be offering this assistance. They would be basically going to the city of McLendon-Chisholm or Heath or Rockwall and saying, guys, we need you to service this neighborhood, this development. And the only way, and we'll pay whatever you want us to pay. That's basically what it would amount to. Because if they're a MUD, the only other option for them is to create their own fire department, which if the city of McLendon-Chisholm had a scintilla of backbone, they would require. And I will tell you this, the city of Heath, they're not going to go with a PID on this. They're not going to provide fire safety to this development. No way, no how. That's why they're being so sweet to the city of McLendon-Chisholm. And then the next thing that they talk about is a $250 home impact fee paid to the city totaling $547,000. So how is that possible? Well, because it's a PID. That's what they're trying to do. But let's keep going. There's still more. It says, and here's another absolute key to this. No city maintenance required for streets, storm sewer, or water infrastructure. Right now, the Sonoma Verde PID does the exact same thing. There is no burden on the city, quote unquote, for taking care of the roads or the sewer or anything like that. Everybody who lives in the PID, they contribute to a fund, a maintenance fund that does exactly that. What's I will have to say, and Scott Turnbull did correct me on something I said on the last show, that the utility fund was that maintenance fund that I was talking about, and it's not. Scott found out that utility fund is actually the sewer tap fees is where that's coming from, but it would repair the sewer system in the Sonoma Verde development. It does the exact same thing, except it's targeted only toward the sewer system in Sonoma Verde. So taking out that utility fund is still the right thing to do because it has no real bearing on the rest of the city. But neither will what the Huffines group is proposing. So here, this is my favorite. The developer will contribute $25,000 a year for 5 years to go toward maintenance of the city park. Oh, great. We're going to have a city park. I don't know what it costs to maintain parks. So I wouldn't even know if that's even close to being enough to take care of a park, especially the one like they're trying to propose. And so this is the development that they're trying to create. They've got a little section there for a school to go in and other things. And so the presentation, when they were with the city, this was, I think, an 80-slide presentation, and it was filled with these illustrative images that evoke just this peace and harmony and just utopian society. Oh my goodness, what a beautiful place to live, to call home. After all, they build communities. McClendon Chisholm isn't a community. They build community. But the telltale sign to me that this development is actually going to happen and that it's going to move forward is basically what I got from the email from the member of City Council. And it's where they write, developers have the right to purchase. They too have the right to develop those properties based on a capitalistic model to which I subscribe, or I think it means ascribe. Maintaining open spaces will be a challenge to preserve based on these property rights that exist in law. Okay. What property rights exist in law that allow this developer to basically violate our city's 1.5 acre minimum per home site? There is no law. The law is on the citizens of McClendon Chisholm sides, not on the developer side. So what exists in law today is what it protects. It does not. It's not on the side of the developer. So but, and the reason why I highlighted that this is a telltale sign that this is what's going to happen, is that they basically show their hand. This is going to be a challenge to preserve based on the property rights that exist today, folks. This is called spin, and this is how the council is going to talk to taxpayers and homeowners, basically saying, "Hey, I'm a capitalist. I subscribe to capitalism. I do too. I'm a free market conservative, but I also believe in the rule of law." Folks, the way Sonoma Verde was created, the way it got moved forward was a very small portion of Sonoma Verde. That front drive basically was inside the city of McClendon Chisholm. The rest of Sonoma Verde, or there may have been a small portion of it that was inside the city at the front, but the majority of it was outside in our ETJ. And so developers basically made this deal. Hey, listen, it's going to be great for your economy, but you're going to have to violate your city's 1.5 acre minimum per home site standard for us to do this. And so if you play ball, this is all the great things that are going to happen. Mike Donegan talked about this profusely. He even came to one city council meeting when I was on council and talked about how we need more PIDs in the city of McClendon Chisholm. Is it any wonder why his name is on the public safety building? Because obviously his mindset, a big government mindset, is very similar to that of Keith Short and most of the city council. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that this is moving forward. Now, here is what I predict, and again, this is all speculative, but based upon history and based upon talking to people, developers who were in the know, who basically looked at this and said, yeah, this is what's going to happen. What's going to happen is this developer is going to come back, and if the city council, if they say, you know what, in the areas that are inside the city of McLendon-Chisholm, you've got to maintain a 1.5 acre minimum per home site standard. And what is predicted to happen, the developer will say, well, you know what? You guys don't want to play ball with us. We were offering you $1 billion in taxes so that you could grow your government. And man, you guys could do everything. And this community, it would be perfect. Since you're not willing to play ball, here's what we're going to do. We are going to, make all the open spaces that we talked about, all that open space is going to be in the city of McLendon-Chisholm. We're going to make our parks and everything like that. And our development, all the homes where you could have gotten tax benefit if you had just played ball and given us a PID and brought us into your city. If you had played ball, you would have gotten all that tax benefit. But what we're going to do is we're just going to walk away and we're going to do our own thing. We're going to create a MUD. And then they're going to also, here's the other thing that they are going to do. They're going to be sending out letters to citizens, to taxpayers, and they're going to be using spin to try to manipulate not only the city council, but you. And they're going to fund city council members who will do their bidding. How do you think that Keith Short, Lorna Kippett, and Trudy Westner got elected? I was the most conservative mayor in our city's history. I lowered our tax rate every year. I brought on the senior tax cap. We brought citizen surveys. We said no to the same developers. And by the way, this Huffines guy, it's very interesting. When I became mayor, when I was appointed mayor after Nathan Hodges was resigned from office after being after having to resign because he had violated the Open Meetings Act by having meetings and trying to influence the city council behind closed doors in violation of the law. When I first became mayor, the County Commissioner Dennis Bailey took me to lunch. And we went to Texas Land and Cattle, I think, or it was one of those places. And we sat down and we were having a little conversation. All of a sudden, out of the blue, this Huffines guy walks up. Hey, Dennis, how are you doing? And I'm looking up, and I've heard of Huffines, the name Huffines. And that's when he kind of, so happened to be there at the same time. What a coincidence. Oh, by the way, have you met the new mayor of McLendon? Oh, well, that's interesting because we're looking at some land and here's some things we'd like to do. And when I said, well, that is just not going to work for our community because I was elected to city council to protect our 1.5 acre minimum per home site standard. And that is a standard, by the way, that does preserve our open spaces. Now, some are going to argue, well, wait a minute, that doesn't preserve your open spaces. Really? It doesn't? You have a community of minimum 1.5 acre home sites. How much open space do you have? You've got a ton of open space. So the problem with 1.5 acre minimum per home site is developers don't like it because it's hard to sell. It makes it more difficult. But isn't it interesting? Wouldn't it be nice to be part of a community where we actually had large lot homes? Where we were kind of, I don't know, I'm going to borrow from Melody Osorio, who runs the Facebook group McLendon-Chisholm Our Town. She calls it an oasis and wants to preserve this oasis. While all of the other cities around us are bending over, not Heath anymore, by the way, Kelsom Elam and that. And Rich Krause and that group is Donna Rollator doing a great job of telling developers, you're going to live by our standards. We're not going to bow down to yours anymore. Heath has learned its lesson. The city of McLendon-Chisholm has not. And they have members of city council who are bought and paid for by developers specifically to do this very thing. The fact that just a few months ago, when the city council only had 2 voting members, Lorna Kippett and Trudy Wessner, who basically approved a development for less than 1 acre per home site. And Lorna Kippett's reason was, well, no one came out to oppose it. If you think for 1 second that they care about our open spaces and want to protect our lifestyle, you've got another thing coming. Next Tuesday, the city council is going to hear a proposal or a presentation about our comprehensive plan and what the people want. What's interesting is the people who are surveyed for this were not just citizens of McLendon-Chisholm. We're not just taxpayers. They invited everyone from outside of our city limits. We have no idea who answered the survey that is informing our city council on what they want to do. The bottom line is the city council didn't care what the citizens want, in my opinion. That is my opinion. And the reason I can say that is because they just passed one of the most bloated budgets that is so fiscally irresponsible to add 2 members of full-time members to government staff that are completely unnecessary, and then have the audacity to say that we are running out of funding sources. We're in crisis, so let's raise the tax rate. That is beyond the pale. Folks, the open space is one of the things that the city survey that I conducted that you'll never be able to find on the city website. Why? Because they don't want you to see what we did. And by the way, if you want to see any of the minutes or any of my videos, you're going to actually have to go to YouTube to see the videos when I was mayor and when I was on city council when we were broadcasting, because you can't get it on the city website, even though their new city website is the same platform, the same WordPress platform. All of those meetings that I led, they're not on our city website anymore. And it starts when Keith Short became mayor. Not a coincidence, folks. This is tyranny at its purest form. Citizens of McLendon-Chisholm, you need to wake up. You need to start asking some questions. And members of city council, I think you need to start explaining during open session of city council meetings why you're voting for this bloated budget, why you're voting for a tax rate increase that is so outrageous. It makes no fiscal sense, especially when you're making false assertions about the budget, about what our city is like. If you have not watched the last show, then you really do need to be informed. Scott Turnbull and I have been working on a show to follow that show up. That will be next week. And we're getting word, or I'm getting some information that it may not be possible for the city to basically reconsider their tax rate vote. Because it's my understanding that had to be in by August 16th, hence the reason why they had the special meeting on August the 16th. So if that's not true, well, then you have another option, and that is to sign the petition to put the tax rollback on the ballot. And of course, I'll put a link to that on this show, and so that you can, the people that are organizing that, who basically love this city and want to protect it, they could use your help, I think. So, but Scott Turnbull is going to be on the show probably next week. His thing is he's a stickler for details, and he's already told me a couple of things I said that was wrong that he wants to correct, which is good. One of them being that he doesn't think that they can rescind the tax rate the tax rate, that it has to go. It's now basically beyond the point of recension. So, and then I spoke about another thing that I misspoke on the utility fund, that it was for the sewer system. So he'll scold. He does a good job of scolding me and keeping me accountable. I just wonder who is keeping our members of City Council accountable, because it certainly isn't members of City Council, is it? Well, I hope that this has been helpful for you, because the whole point of this show is to present you facts, and when I speculate on things, I tell you, here's what I think. This is what I believe is going to happen. And I hope to goodness that some of the things that I'm predicting don't come true. I hope to goodness that the Hodges estate doesn't become this massive development by the Huffines Development Group. I think it would be a monumental mistake. It would be millstone around taxpayers' neck. But that's neither here nor there. I guess time will tell. And to the city council member who basically has been at least communicating, they don't want to talk on the phone anymore. They just want me to write back on email or answer back on the show, which I'm doing, and I hope that I have answered the questions appropriately to their satisfaction. Even if they disagree, that's okay. We can disagree. That's the way conservatives should work. I do want to remind you that next Tuesday in studio, I will have Congressman Pat Fallon, who will be here for some straight talk. So if you have questions for the congressman about what's going on in our nation's capital, please send them to me at bob@bunkerbob.com, and I'll be sure to make sure that we get those questions answered. So I hope this has been good for you. I hope you have a great day. And until next time, we will see you then. Blessings to you all.